Hey,
Good afternoon.
you said you were setting up your stand, and I was like, wait, I have a stand, but I didn't have time to put it up. I don't know how to do it. So
Really? Last I have like two different kind. Like one is like this Joby stand where you can like contort it. I couldn't find the other like attachment last week, so but I got myself together.
okay, I'm gonna try next week. I'll be in. I'll have myself together. Okay, so we are talking about genetics, epigenetics, and genetics. Okay, so why did you want to talk about genetics?
Well, this actually came up like in a recent session with a client that I had, and she just kind of really was more mindset. And she was like, well, I just feel like, looking around at my family, they're smaller and I'm bigger. So I just have this mindset that weight loss isn't for me, or it just can't be for me. And it really was like really discouraging for her. So then we kind of went into this discussion of like epigenetics, and it was kind of in the reverse though. But I was basically telling her that it's just biology. It's not you. It's not your willpower. It's not like how much you can stay away from, I don't know, the sugars or whatever. And so what also I was going through the course that, we are in dialogue about, right? And I know that you were talking about epigenetics in the course too, and the fact that a lot of times when it comes to these diseases and things like that, it's more so of your lifestyle as opposed to what you've been predisposed to. Yeah. So I think that this is a really good conversation because it's this misconception that diabetes ran in my family. My granny had it, my grandma, or my great grandma had it, my uncles have it. And so I'm just, at some point I'm going to get it, and that's what it's going to be to take me out, and it's unfortunate that people think this way, but I mean, it's a common thought. So I thought that it would be good to dispel that.
No, it's so funny because it's the one thing that drives me more than anything is to get rid of a lot of these predisposed or these concepts or these ideas that we have that are just not true. And there's a lot of them. There's a lot of things that people believe that aren't true, but the one that I think is most prevalent is this idea that your genetics have a whole lot to do with your health. And to be clear, there are certain diseases that are genetically, there's a direct correlation. For example, my daughter has sickle cell. That is genetic, right? But the majority of the chronic illnesses that people suffer from, like diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, these are diseases of lifestyle. They have a genetic component to it, but the genetic component is much, much smaller than what people think. Even cancers. I mean, when I hear people talk about things like breast cancer, there's this overarching prevailing idea that this is, mainly genetic driven. And there is a very, very small percentage of people who get cancer because of their family members, but it's such a small percentage. And the perception is that it's a huge percentage. And so it's really getting people to understand that there's so much you can do, right? There's so much you can do to prevent illness. There's so much you can do to live to an old age. There's so much you can do about a lot of the things that you might think are just, inevitable or destined to be, right? So there's no destiny when it comes to your health. You have a lot of control over that. And I think one of the things is that when we talk about this topic, it's like, okay, so how, right? How do you control whether or not you develop the illness or not? And that's actually not a hard question to answer. It's the way that we live our lives. It's the choices that we make. It's in the behaviors. And you have used a term called epigenetics. And before, instead of me going through it, I want to get a sense from you, sort of, had you ever heard of epigenetics before? And if so, what's your sort of take on what epigenetics is?
Yeah, so I learned about it when I was going through my training back 2019. But for me, and my understanding of it is, even though you might be predisposed to X disease, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to get it based on what foods you're giving your body, because food is information. So based on what information you're giving your body, you're going to either turn on these genes being expressed, or you're going to keep them off. It's like a light switch. So it's not like, even though this might run in your blood kind of thing, you have you have the power to decide whether this will show up in your life or not. So that's my like understanding of it and how I express it to clients when it comes up.
Yeah, no, and that's why I wanted you to say it, because oftentimes when I say it, I like get too technical, but that's exactly what I would have said, right?
Yeah.
It's exactly right. It's this idea that your environment, how your environment influences your genes.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, when we turn these genes on or turn them off, are they going to turn on and be good, or are they going to turn off and be, good? It's a question of how do you manipulate your genes in a way that are going to have a positive effect. And that's one of the reasons why, I do what I do, is to help people figure out, how do we turn these genes on or off in the direction of health? Because you can actually make things worse too, right? So you can turn your genes into something that is so, provocative to lead to diabetes or hypertension or cancer, or you can do it the opposite. You can prevent it altogether. And so I think one of the other things that I often hear people say is that, I not necessarily hear people say, but I see people do, is that when they come to the doctor, they're very overly reliant on the doctor to like heal them, right? So people come to the doctor for the doctor to say, this is what you need to do for you to be healthy. And so they relinquish their power over to, a physician, thinking that the physician has all the power. But I try to remind people, it's like, I may be an expert in my area, but you're an expert in your body. And you kind of have to know your body to be able to know what your body needs. You have to be in tune with your body to understand what it needs. I can help guide you. You can help guide people. That's what our job is. But as far as who's the expert and how your body is going to respond, that's up to you. And we have to work in collaboration to figure those things out so that you have more control over your health. And that's what I'm always telling people, like, how do you get control over your health? Because you do. You ultimately have the control. It's not in the pills that the doctor writes you. It's not in your genetics. It's in you understanding what factors influence your health and which factors can damage your health. So maybe we should talk about some of those factors.
Yeah, well, I love that you say that, right? About basically being your own health advocate, because even and like you were saying, going to the doctors, it's very easy to look at people in these roles like know all be all, right? Know everything about every disease and everything going on in your body, when it's very hard to step into that role of, I know my body well enough to know when something is going right, when something is going wrong. And it's also, it's very, it takes a lot of intentionality to go through that process of learning your body. So what do you think is like the most fundamental thing that you can do in terms of learning your body, learning what works well for your body? Like bare minimum, taking this big concept, epigenetics, like making it very, very simple.
Gosh, there's so many. Because there are tons of really simple things. Okay, but the most obvious is going to be food. I think.
Yeah.
Food is, I tend to start with food because it's so powerful. And really, it's one of the things that you can actually be very insightful about how it affects you. So when people are always talking about what's the perfect diet, I'm always telling people the perfect diet, there's some basic ground rules to the perfect diet, but then beyond that, you have to figure out how your body responds to food. So a lot of people, when they have symptoms of fatigue, brain fog, or bloating, or feeling gaseous, or having GERD or heartburn, diarrhea, constipation, all of these symptoms, they may be driven by the foods that you eat. And people don't want to necessarily admit that, right? They will say, oh, it's probably something I'm eating. But then they stop there. They don't recognize that, oh, okay, so the next step after recognizing that it's something that you're eating is, how do I figure out what it is that's bothering me? And then the other thing that messes people up is oftentimes not wanting to take accountability for having to change something. So, okay, so I know that if I have hot sauce, for example, I'm going to get heartburn. But the next comment that I hear oftentimes is, well, but I can't give up my hot sauce, right? Yeah. So it's this sense of, number one, recognizing that something can be affecting you. Number two, figuring out what that thing is. And then number three, figuring out if that food has to be removed, and how you can enjoy that food so that you can live a life where you are symptomless, where those symptoms are no longer bothering you. And that's a personal decision, right? But the answer isn't going to be take Nexium, right? So you could say, okay, I'm going to have this food that causes me to have terrible heartburn. And when I have it, I'm then going to take this prescription medicine. That is a choice. And it's not a wrong choice. It's just a choice. Or you could say, well, rather than just treat the illness once I get it, or treat the symptom once I get it, which is just a Band-Aid, you can also take the approach is I'm going to prevent myself from having this issue so that I can enjoy my day without having to worry about not being able to sleep because my stomach is burning, or, ruining my afternoon because I'm, gaseous all day, right? So you have a choice in how you want to deal with it because you have options. Right?
Yeah.
And part of living a lifestyle that promotes health is really not about telling what you can and can't do. It's more about giving you options so that you can make decisions about the way you feel, and you don't feel like the reason you feel this way is out of your control, right? That's the idea of taking control of your health, is that I can now control how I feel because I know what's triggering it.
Yeah. And then two is also taking a very comprehensive approach to it and understanding that food, yeah, it's a big part, and that's one factor. But to your question earlier, let's also talk about stress. Let's also talk about the relationships that you have around you, because one of the first things that I learned when I was kind of going through my training was, you could be the person, you eat all the greens, all the salads, all the things, right? But if you go home and you're in an abusive relationship, how optimal is your health really? Because now you start talking about your mental health and how that's affecting your body, because it does have very tangible effects on your body. And so I think that a lot of times people, they try to segment these components of our health instead of saying, let's take a whole approach. Let's look at the whole person, the whole body, and heal the entirety of you, and not try to break you down into these little pieces. So what are your thoughts on that? The comprehensive approach to health and healing.
You know what I'm going to say. No, it's absolutely true. As a matter of fact, that's my life, right? That was my life. I have always known, well, I wouldn't always know, but for a good part of my life and my career, I've known the things that are supposed to promote health. I knew the things, how to eat, how to exercise. I was a meditator, all of these things. Yet my stress levels were out the roof, and I got burned out, and it was reflected not just in my mental health, but also in my physical health, right? And so that's an experience that's very relatable to me, because it isn't just that one thing. And once you understand, okay, all of the little pieces that play into it, it doesn't mean you have to be 100% in all of those areas, but again, it gives you your power back. Now okay, so I've done the food thing, but I'm also working on my sleep. I'm also working on my stress management skills. And so once you start to build a lifestyle around health, and you start to think about your life from a health perspective, it allows you to make choices that, again, influence how you feel, how you age, the diseases you develop, and all the like. And so, yes, there's, in my approach, I've really tried to break all of these areas down into really 7 basic areas, right? So those are food, right? There's food life, there's sleep life, there's resilient life, which is all about stress management. There's detox life, which is all about detoxification and the toxins that are in your environment. There's connected life, which is about relationships, like you mentioned, which just to stop on connected life, because people always gloss over it as if it's not a big issue, but your relationships has a huge impact. The people who you surround yourself, your friends, what their thought process is, all of that influences whether you're overweight, whether you develop diseases. So connected life is a huge one as well. And what am I forgetting? Did I say food? Oh, fit life. So fitness, right? So food and fitness are the ones that get blown up all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But your fitness is also just one aspect. And then the last one is personal life. And it's usually the first one I talk about. And that has to do with your intention. It has to do with where you find purpose and meaning and how you approach things. And if you think about it in this way, when you think about all of these areas, these are things that you do anyway. The question is, can you do it better so that you can be healthy, right? These aren't new things that are so outside of your realm. You don't need a prescription for it. You don't need to spend a ton of money on supplements for it. You don't need to, do a lot of things that are different. You just have to take the things that you're doing and improve upon them. And so it doesn't take more time and it doesn't take more money. It's just, you got to know what they are and then figure out, what works for you.
Yeah, and even to that point, I've had to learn really more so recently in like coaching clients that one of the simplest principles that I can, I guess, share with them is the idea of better versus optimal.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about this a little bit, but it's like, okay, having the apple is better than having the apple Pop-Tart, Or like a smoothie in the morning is better than a fruit smoothie is better than having Fruit Loops, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what's optimal is like a smoothie, but one that's filled with greens.
Mm-hmm.
That has all the phytonutrients and doesn't have. Yes, it's natural sugar, but it's still sugar if you load it up with a bunch of the fruits, right? So that's one thing that I've had to learn to kind of help people make the distinction of those small changes that can be made. And it doesn't have to be these huge shifts. It's like, to your point, you're doing these things anyway. How can we just make them a little bit better? So my question to you is, for the person who feels like, nah, I mean, my health is okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm young,
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty vibrant,
Mm-hmm.
I can survive off 4 hours of sleep and I get up and, I'm ready to go again. I don't really need to think too much about this. Like, what would you say to that person?
Well, okay, so I'm going to go to my segment of personal life, right? So there's one way of approaching this is saying, okay, so if you're not ready to like live a better life, and then you're not ready, and it's okay, right? Like I would encourage people to understand that really the earlier you start to develop these behaviors, the better you'll be over the long haul and the easier it is, so that you don't have to then fix something that's already damaged. But if you're not mentally ready, if you're not in the space that you're ready to move forward and make these changes, then, at some point you will. You just don't want to wait till it's too late, right? So when you start early, when you're feeling good and you start to learn these behaviors early, then you really push off the development of disease. You push off the decline in the way that you might feel as you start to age and as you start to go through menopause. Particularly as you start to go through perimenopause and menopause, particularly for women, but even andropause for men. So you are delaying a decline in your health that would become inevitable if you just went off and didn't pay attention to your health at all. And I want to make this point, well, since I brought it up. So a lot of the diseases that people associate with aging, oh, my joints hurt. I'm just getting old, or my memory's going, I'm just getting old. I hear that so often, that there's this association with age and decline in health. And this perception is reality because of the environment we live in, right? And because of the way that we're living. And just like you said, that person who's living their life, they're getting 4 hours of sleep, they're eating whatever they want, and they think they can do this forever. Well, the natural progression of that is a decline in your health as you get older. However, if you decide to take a different approach and adopt behaviors and lifestyle factors that actually improve your health, then that isn't a natural progression of aging. Like, you don't have to get sick as you get older. Like, take a moment to just think about that. Think about all the people in your life. Think about your grandmother, your grandfather, your mom, your dad, and all the people in your life that you've watched get ill. And you may have thought that it was inevitable, and it's not. And this is why I'm so passionate about the work that I do is because I'm watching people decline around me, because I'm a physician and I'm seeing people in the hospital, and I'm seeing people even in my family and my friends, and I'm seeing them decline. And I just, in the back of my mind, I'm like, it didn't have to be this way.
Mm-hmm.
And so for that person who's like, you know, I'm living the way that what's natural. I'm living the best life that I can at this particular stage of my life, and I'm getting away with it. The question is, do you also want to decline naturally the way that you would by living this way? So again, these are questions for you to ask yourself. That's where personal life comes in. It's this idea of you being self-reflective and figuring out, okay, at what point am I ready to make change that's going to improve my health? And I did a little reel the other day where I was talking about, you know, these are skills that you have to learn. If you don't ever learn them, then you will naturally decline as you get older. But if you learn the right skills, you'll thrive as you get older. And for me, this is the realization I came to myself as, you know, when I hit 40, and I was like, okay, I've got at least another 40 years of my life. I don't want to spend that time going downhill. Like, I have a whole other life to live. Mm-hmm. I'm about to double this experience, but this half, I actually have money, and I actually have resources, and I actually have kids, and I have a husband, all of which I want to enjoy, right? So like, why would I, you know, sort of throw my hands up and just say, well, we'll wait for age. You know what I mean? So I think that's really a decision, right? It's a decision we make. It doesn't have to be a hard one. It just has to be a decision that you think about at some point, you know, and if you're not ready right now, then hopefully, you know, sooner than later, you'll be ready.
Yeah. And that's good. And that's also in kind of in light of, yeah, people are living longer, but people are living longer sicker, which is really unfortunate. Now, what I did, when you were talking, what it made me think about is the mobility aspect, which that's what I learned from you recently. So talk a little bit about that, of how big of a factor the mobility is as we age, and how that can ultimately be the thing that takes you out.
So I always talk about this, particularly in relation to my grandmother. My grandmother lived to be 93. And she didn't have any real chronic illnesses. I mean, I think she, at the very end, may have had a little bit of high blood pressure, and she was obese. She was, you know, significantly overweight, but did not have all of the diseases that were associated with obesity. So diabetes, heart disease. I mean, she was healthy. Her issue was, because she was obese, she stopped being able to move in the last 5 years of her life. She was bedbound. And that eventually was the thing that took her out, because she couldn't carry that weight as her muscle mass started to decline with age. So muscle mass, flexibility, bone strength, all of these things can decline as a natural progression of aging. The question is are we doing anything to, number one, slow that? And are we doing anything to make sure that our muscle mass stays or is retained, so that as we get older, we don't get slumped over and we don't lose our mobility? And so this is something that, you know, I think about in terms of, okay, so if I plan on living to be 90 and healthy, what do I need to be doing today so that I can optimize the way that I feel in 40 years from now, right? What types of behaviors, what level of strength do I need now so that my strength is adequate to be able to pick up my great-grandchildren in 30 years? Now, this seems like something that's really far off, but the reality is that what I do today makes a whole difference. So if you're not thinking about your muscle mass, if you're not thinking about your ability to balance, if you're not thinking about your flexibility, and it's not great now, what do you think it's going to be like in 30, 40 years? And if it's good now, how are you going to maintain it as the natural progression of our bodies start to break down, because we've been on this earth for a long time? So figuring out how to maintain your strength as you age is extremely vital to living a good life, but also living a long life and being physical throughout that length of that life. Because the other major cause of death, you know, I talked about my grandmother, but the biggest one is fractures. Is, you know, you fell How many people might know someone who fell and broke their hip? The rates of death for that population after you break a hip or something like that is astronomical. So again, how do you prevent that? You prevent that by strength training, particularly if you're a woman. Particularly if you're a woman. We have the higher rates of hip fractures, but we also have greater losses in muscle mass and bone strength. So yeah, this is just, again, knowing these things, having this knowledge is really helpful, but then knowing what to do to implement into your lifestyle so that it's not something you have to work at. It's just something that is. You are used to being able to maintain your muscle mass. You're used to being able to be flexible. These are parts of your lifestyle that you don't have to add. You don't have to go to the gym and do something extra. You've incorporated. Oh, somebody made it. Yeah, my faster. Yeah. Oh, so this is a flex focus photography. That's absolutely true. Once you break a bone, your rates of death go up astronomically because you're less mobile. Your muscles start to break down, and it's just not a pleasant existence at that point. Even your mental health. We've seen dementia take place after people have fractures. So again, for the young, healthy person who is thinking to themselves, I don't need to worry about this. What I try to educate people about is that this is the time to think about it, right? This is the time to ensure that you're doing what you need to do so that you, and when it is a problem, you don't have to make up for lost time. Right? Because trying to fix a problem after it's broken is much different than preventing it from happening in the first place.
Yeah, okay. So last question, specifically for, well, not even specifically for women, I guess in general. Mm-hmm. What do you think that fine balance is specifically with the weight training? Because we talk about how it can be kind of counterproductive sometimes when trying to lose weight, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's increasing your cortisol and it's making your body hold on to that fat. However, it's still important because you need that resistance for your bone density, right? For the benefits of that. So what, in your opinion, does that look like? Is that body weight? Is it like light free weight exercises? Like, what is that balance between not doing too much and doing enough, for your longevity?
So when we work with in our program, I don't recommend doing a whole lot of intense working out, but that's not because I don't recommend it. So it is absolutely a vital part of a workout routine. And it's not an issue of balance so much as it is of knowing where to start. Right. So, and what I mean by that is that in our program, what I'm trying to get people to do is to balance their nervous system. Mm-hmm. And so we back off from some of the things that drain our nervous system, so that we can then have more energy to then implement these strategies that we need to implement as far as weight training and physical fitness. The issue that comes in is that oftentimes people believe that what they did when they were 20 is going to work for them in their 40s and their 50s and their 60s. And understanding how your body changes over time so that you can adopt your workout strategy to your age. Now, that doesn't mean that as you get older, you can't do these things. It's just understanding how to do them and how to do them safely, right? Injuries can go up if you're still trying to lift the same way you were lifting, 20 years ago. You might have to make a change in the way you are working out. But the main area that I think gets a lot of confusion is in cardio, right? And well, I don't know if it's just cardio. It's really like sort of endurance. It's the endurance that people, particularly women, I think, make some of their errors as they go through perimenopause and menopause. And perimenopause, keep in mind, because if you're a young person and you're like 38 and you're like perimenopause, that's like 20 years from now. It's not. You could be in perimenopause at 35. I am, and I was. So the point that I was making is that your endurance, when you feel your body is tired, there's a moment to push through, and then there's a moment to listen. So there's a moment where you say, okay, I need to pull back. And the reason is that you might be overstimulating your stress response, and your body does not know how to adjust. And then you're realizing later on down the line that you're more tired, that you can't sleep, that you're wired, that you're anxious, that you're depressed. And it's because your body is overexhausted itself. So really, the balance comes into understanding your body, understanding the changes that happen in your body as you get older, and then understanding how do you change your workouts and your movement to incorporate all of that, right? So I don't want people to stop or to think that they're not supposed to be working out, or they're not supposed to be doing, weight training or cardio or any of that. But you do need to know that it's different. And our knowledge about, cardio and weights, all of that has also changed since I was in medical school, understanding how our bodies respond. So you really have to work with someone who knows what they're talking about. And you also have to be able to understand your own body so that you know how to implement these strategies in a safe way.
So I'm glad that you said that. So if people want to know more and they want to work with you,
and you, if they want to work with us, how might they do that? Okay, so we have a program. It's called the Black Women's Guide to Health, Hormones, and Longevity. And this program is an 8-week program that teaches you all the skills that we're talking about right now. And it allows you to be able to implement these strategies in a safe and supportive environment with the expertise of both me as a functional medicine physician and Chatila as a certified health coach. So we're able to help you navigate all of these things that we're talking about, and so that you can take control of your health. And if you want more information, you can go to the blackwomensguide.com, which is BLKWOMANSGUIDE.com, to get more information about the program. You can follow me on Dr. Nicole Peoples on all the platforms. And you can book a discovery call if you're wondering, is this program for me? Is there, what if I want to work with you as a patient? What does that look like? If you have any of those questions, you should book a discovery call. You can do that from the blackwomensguide.com. Or I guess that you can also find me at drnicolepeoples.com. It's my other website. So just like all of my handles, Dr. Nicole Peoples. Peoples with an O. So, okay, that was our live. We'll be back next Tuesday at 6. 5 is kind of a good time. Sometime between 5 and 6.
Yeah.
On Tuesdays, we go live and we answer all your questions. So if you have questions, go ahead and send them, DM me or Chatila. You can DM us your questions. You can post your questions in the chat and we will answer them.
Okay. I don't see any lingering right now.
Okay.
So do you?
Nope.
Okay. Well, I know you have to get to your podcast recording.
Yes. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. We'll talk in the morning. Bye.
All right. Bye.